In 2017, we dropped a pin on a map in the center of the square in downtown Noonan. And then we drew a 5-mile radius, 59,125 residents, 64 to 72% of which are disconnected from faith. Over the last 4 years, 1 pre-launch, 3 post-launch, we have entrenched ourselves in this particular part of the community, serving the heart of downtown Noonan and places like Ruth Hill Elementary School, Noonan High School, downtown business owners bridging the gap, and Main Street Noonan. During those same 4 years, we've had many opportunities to leave the downtown area in order to have our very own space. But we've always chosen people over property. The relationships we have created in downtown will always matter more than our own property elsewhere. After all, people are our destination. About 6 weeks ago, we were awakened to an opportunity to take a step towards a piece of property in downtown Noonan at the heart of where these relationships have been formed. The old Wells Fargo building at 30 Greenville Street, the roof of which I am currently standing on. Unfortunately, the more we looked into it, the more it became apparent that while we could afford the monthly cost of the building, we would have to raise funds for the renovation. And the renovation cost was beyond what we could reasonably take on as a church. We received this news a couple of days before the tornado hit. Needless to say, it has been a rough couple of weeks. We've stood with families that have lost everything, drove streets that were once familiar and are now unrecognizable, and have come to the harsh reality that we have no place to gather on Sundays. Well, that was until the generosity of strangers showed up. It turns out folks that have no connection with Foundation are all in on helping us find a home. And this just blows my mind. Because of their generosity that adds up to a couple $100,000, I have some incredible news. I'm excited to share with you that we are officially under contract with the former Wells Fargo building in downtown Noonan, 30 Greenville Street. And while the generosity of those not connected to Foundation made this project reachable, the path forward still isn't without its own challenges. Our Foundation fam will need to kick in as well, but it's doable. And I believe that God will use every inch of the 18,000 square feet below me to continue what He started at Noonan High School on January 14th, 2018, as we launch this church that each of you have come to know and love. In the first 10 days after the tornado touchdown, this 18,000 square foot former bank was used to receive and distribute 238,612 non-perishable items for families in need. We coordinated over 10,700 hot meals for those impacted by the storm and was the sending center for the cleanup crews that took care of over 50 yards in the hardest hit areas and mobilized over 700 volunteers to serve the people in the city of Noonan. And at that time, this building wasn't even ours. This is 18,000 square feet to use as a launching point for the work in this community, a place to be equipped, inspired, to prepare and strategize, to seek help when in need and find connections that transform our lives. But ultimately, it's 18,000 square feet to leave. Yes, to leave. You see, 30 Greenville Street will not be a destination, no. It's simply a starting point. Better yet, it's a base camp. It's where the adventure begins, an adventure that leads us to the most incredible destinations, the lives of people. Yeah. I can't explain to you the journey that our staff and leadership team has been on over the last 7 or 8 weeks now. It's been just constant up and downs from we are under contract to everything's going fine. There's issues with just a myriad of things that happen when you open a building up, to contractual issues, to ordinance issues, to then the cost issue. It's out of reach. I knew we'd have to raise money, but
when the numbers came back, it was just ridiculous, and it was just not doable. And so we had given up on it. The Monday before the tornado hit, we were just done. And it hurt for us as a staff because we were excited, but no one else was aware of it at that time. Few folks that had just heard kind of rumors in the city and such, but we were just like, we're not going to make an announcement. There's nothing we can do. And then all of a sudden, just folks that were not connected to Foundation showed up and just said, hey, we're willing to give, and we're willing to make this doable. And if it wasn't for those strangers that made themselves connected and friends, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. Now, we can't depend on people not connected to Foundation to foot the bill for us because this will be ours. And so we have our work to do. But it's doable, and it's very much within reach. Now, we have our normal series that we're right in the middle of, and you came to church today not to come and hear about specifics to fundraise and all those kind of things. And so we're going to get to that, but not today. We're going to celebrate the fact that God has made this doable, and he's put this in our court to say, I've paved the path for you. Do you want it? And so we're incredibly grateful for that opportunity. I tell you a couple just brief stories that really just, blew my mind. There was a church in Tucson, Arizona that's about to launch. They're a church plant. They sat in a workshop that I did in Florida last year at Exponential before COVID hit. And this church planter, who was a year out of launching the church with the same network we planted with Stadia, sat in the workshop. We met afterwards. I remember him briefly. He asked specifically about our ice cream truck. I connected him with Jason and said, hey, he can answer all your questions with it. So I remember the interaction. Well, it turns out he connected back with me a few weeks ago. They're about to have their launch Sunday. And he said, hey, we want one of our first big acts of generosity as a baby church, like still unborn church, right? Still in the womb, haven't had a launch Sunday, is we want to send you a check for $3,000, which, when we look at the total thing, it's like, man, $3,000 is not going to make an enormous dent for a church like that. I remember what it was like when we launched. We had nothing, much less $3,000 to send halfway across the country to people we met one time for an hour in a workshop at a conference, right? It blew my mind. And then we had another church here not too far from us, just in the county next door, heard what happened. And they sent a check for $5,000 and said, hey, put it towards that. And then we had a church from Kentucky reach out, and they're sending us $10,000 to help us get started in this. And then there have been people, yes, you can clap about it, yeah. It's just been absolutely unreal. They reached out, and we just said, hey, is this going to be doable for us? And I told them, I said, no, we don't have a place, and it's too expensive. And I just can't ask our church to try and take on something that I just know is just out of. And so they just all went to work. And it's done it. About $200,000, just over $200,000 in generosity has come to us from people that did not go to Foundation. It's just unreal. So I'm pumped about it. I'm excited about it. Right now, you can go to foundationnewnan.com/basecamp. We can throw that link in the chat for those of you who are watching online, foundationnewnan.com/basecamp. It's got the video that we just played, as well as some basic FAQs. And then that page will be expanded next week because we're going to release a ton of more information. We're going to talk about the steps we need to do to get there, as well as how everyone can help and get involved and be a part of it. We're going to be running some open houses for everyone if you want to come and check it out, to see how the space works. We've had an architect draw up some conceptual plans to allow you to see how the space could work as a gathering space and everything like that. And so we'll open those up. We'll have 3 or 4 open houses, and all of that information will come next week. But you can check out the basic info right now at foundationnewnan.com/basecamp. I think it's really important that we recognize we will never have a church building. It will always be a starting point, and we'll always call it Base Camp. Deal? Let me pray for us. We'll jump in. God, I thank you that you've brought us to a place like this and that you've humbled our leadership team by having people from all over the country and people in our community that have never attended our church say, hey, we've got to jump in with you to make this happen. It just blows my mind. And I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to play a tiny part in the role of what Foundation does in this community on your behalf, God. Father, I thank you for the Base Camp piece. But also thank you for the opportunity you've given us this morning to open up your word and say, hey, what do you have for us? So let us direct our minds there. Let us get some work in this morning so that we might do a better job at our work when we leave here in just a few minutes. For it's in Jesus' name we pray these things. Amen. I don't know about you, but I'm the kind of parent that loves to embarrass my children. I've got one child that does not embarrass as easy. Her name's Hadley, and she's 7. She's our little girl. And if we're walking in the store and I start to sing, if she knows the song, she'll sing with me. If I tell her it's time to dance in the middle of the aisle, she will dance with me. Like all those things. So it's really hard for me to embarrass Hadley. However, we have a little boy who's 2 years older. His name is Emerson. And man, I can just look at him and say, Emerson, in a loud voice, like in just a, hey, Emerson. And he'll be like, Dad, shh, you're being too loud. Like there's people here, right? So anytime I have the opportunity and we're just like chilling and we're having like a good connection, Father, some moment, then I just pick a song and I just break out and we'll start dancing. Like, come on, let's have a dance party right now, E. He's like, no. I'm like, yeah, come on, let's do it. Come on, right? And we're just, no matter who's around, that's it. If I love to embarrass them. If you love to embarrass people, we can have an embarrass off, and I don't get awkward. It just is what it is. Like, come on, bring it. Let's do it. You know what I'm saying? So I pick him up in the car rider line, which for me is pretty rare. But if I pick him up in the car rider line, I can roll my window down and like reach my head and my hand outside the truck. I'm like, Emerson, I'm right here. Daddy loves you. I missed you so much today. And he's like, oh my gosh. And Hallie's like, hey, Daddy. It's great. I thought that it was just me that was doing this for the longest time. I was like, it's just me. It turns out it's not even generational. That this embarrassment by parents has been going on for quite some time. In fact, there's a moment that Jesus has an interaction with a mama that embarrasses the snot out of her 2 boys. And I want to pick up there in our week 3 of the series of collection of talks called Countermove. So we're going to take a look at the book of Matthew. Matthew is the very first book in the New Testament. The Bible is broken into 2 parts. There's the Old Testament, which chronicles the people of God and how we get to Jesus. And then the New Testament begins chronicling Jesus' life and everything that comes as a result of who Jesus is. And so Matthew writes the very first book we find that starts chronicling Jesus and what comes after. And so in chapter 20, Matthew writes this. He begins to tell this story. He says this, we'll put it on the screen. And then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, asked a favor of him. What is it you want? He asked. She said, grant that one of these 2 sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in the kingdom. And so this mama, and I'm just picturing it, the Bible doesn't say this, I'm just picturing this mama like huddled with her 2 boys the night before and saying, I'm just going to ask him tomorrow. If y'all not going to ask him, I'm going to ask him. And like, no, Mama, you don't ask Jesus these things. You know what I'm saying? He's like, no, if you're going to ask him, I'm going to ask him because y'all deserve, you just wait. I'm going to take care of it. Don't you wait. And then all of a sudden, I can just picture her like grabbing their 2 hands and walking towards Jesus. Now, that's not what happened at all. But that's what I'm picturing. Just the embarrassment that has to be on her 2 boys' face as Jesus is standing there, King of the world, Son of God. And this mama walks up to him and says, hey, I got a favor to ask. Right? I got a favor to ask. Would you let my kids, one sit on your left and one sit on your right? Notice she uses the word favor. Like, hey, would you do me a solid, Jesus, and give the 2 most influential, powerful positions in your kingdom to my boys? Would you just do me a favor? Because probably you owe me, a little bit. Like, wait, is that what she's thinking? Will you do me a favor? I think if we're asking for favor to find favor from God, we're probably up to something we ought not be up to. If we have to ask God for a favor to find favor, we're probably up to something we ought not to be. Jesus looks at these 2, and I don't know if he inserts eye roll here, eye roll emoji, I'm not sure. But Jesus looks back at them, and I'll read you what he says. He says this. He says, you don't know what you're asking, Jesus said to them. Can you drink the cup that I'm going to drink? We can, they answered, with confidence. We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father. In other words, to sit in those chairs require more than simply an appointment. That's not something that could just be, you know what? I got these 2 empty chairs. This is a fantastic kingdom. Why don't you come sit? And why don't you come sit? He said, hey, it's not like that. In fact, I love what Jesus does because Jesus takes their question. He acknowledges that it's actually a possibility that there will be people seated to the left and to the right. But he takes that acknowledgement, he acknowledges their request, acknowledges that this is a doable thing in terms of there will be people there, but then he begins to point them to something that's much larger and bigger than themselves. In fact, he goes so far to say, guys, it's not even up to me. That my Father decides who sits on my left and my right. In other words, he's acknowledging and taking their question and saying, I get that you think that what you see here is as good as it's going to get. But Jesus is saying, you ain't seen anything yet. There's something beyond even what you think I can give you. And that's really what you want to be a part of. Now, he points them to something greater than themselves. And he tells them, hey, something's coming greater than I am, and it's not up to me. You think I'm great, but here it is. In other words, what Jesus is trying to tell them, he's saying, hey, you're chasing the right thing, but you're going about it the wrong way. He's saying, you're on to something, guys. You're on to something, mama. You're on to something. However, you are going about it the wrong way. You see, she wanted what every mom wants, what every dad wants, and just this desire for their children to be significant. You know, that no one wants their kid to be just like an afterthought. No, everyone wants their kid to be, man, I want my kid to play a significant role. I want my kid to do something significant. I want my child to grow in to be significant in other people's lives. We're chasing significance. So she wanted her boys to be significant. So she assumed that would require status. She wanted her boys to be significant. And she made the poor assumption that to be significant, that would require status. You see, here's the lie. You should write this down. The path to significance must be status. That's the lie. That's the lie. Let's take a look at it. Let's look at our own status symbols. What are some status symbols that we have? If you're online, you can throw them in the comments. Though I won't be able to read them at this very moment, but our folks that are online hosting, they'll be able to read them and they'll be able to interact with you. But for those of you here in the room, I mean, just shout out if you got one. What are some status symbols in our culture, in our world today? Cars. Man, car was the first one. Yeah. Do you want a Bugatti? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about? Only some of you got the reference. It's fine. You got to work. You know what I'm saying? The thing is, yesterday I was sitting in Mad Mexican, and I was sitting outside on the picnic table, and all of a sudden, this Bentley drove up, like parked, and I was like, bro, you know, like there's cars whizzing by here. There's people in trucks driving by, and they're so close because you kind of stick out in the square. Like, are you sure you want to park that there? You know what I'm talking about? But I was like, you can leave it there because I'm going to look at it. You know what I'm saying? Man, good grace alive. Now, I ain't driving no Bentley because Bentleys don't make no trucks, and I'm Ford tough. You know what I'm saying? Come on. Now, let's talk about a King Ranch. Come on, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Get one of them Super Duty King. Woo! Black it out. Put them. I'm saying, see, I'm in trouble already. Good gracious alive. Right? So we got status symbols. Houses, cars, jobs, offices. What's that? Harley Davidson. Come on. I want an Indian. You know what I'm talking about? Black it out. Put that brown leather on. I want an Indian so bad. Come on. My wife keeps telling me, no, I'll kill myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on, I'm so responsible. I'm good. Dad lets me drive slow on the driveway. It's fine. There's another movie reference. Y'all missed it. It's one of the greatest movies of all time. Nevertheless, we got status. Thank you. We got status, right? We got these symbols that say, hey, this is what we want. And if we achieve this status symbol, that means it elevates our significance. We assume that, hey, if we have the ability to procure whatever that item is or whatever that tangible thing is, that once we have that, in that moment, that then elevates who we are to the people around us. And I get it. It makes sense. Because here's the deal. It's hard to get the status symbols. It really is. I saw this meme just this past week. Or actually, it was 2 weeks ago. And it was just this super long meme. Like, it just kept going and going. And it started with a guy walking, and next to it was the guy with the bike. And the guy walking was looking at the guy with the bike. He's like, man, I wish I had that, you know? And then the guy on the bike was next to a guy with a little beater car, right? And he was looking at the beater car and said, man, if I only had the beater car. And then the beater car, there we go. The beater car was next to a guy who had a little bit better car. And he was looking at that. And then he was looking at a sports car. And then it just went on like this. It never ended. In other words, like, the meme just keeps going because there's never enough. Your status symbol is always something else. It's always the next thing. It's always, there's got to be something better. There's got to be something beyond. This can't be as good as life gets. There's got to be something more. I want the left and the right seat. And listen, once I get there, man, that's it. And Jesus says, there's something beyond what you can see. There's something past what you can currently understand. There is something that extends beyond, that's greater than what you and I can sense in this moment. And so if you keep chasing these status symbols, you're missing out. Now, there's some fellas, some friends that hear about this request from this mom and these two boys. And it's in this particular passage, I'll read it to you. It calls them the 10. It's Matthew 20:24. When the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the two brothers. And so the 10 plus the 2 is the 12, and the 12 are the closest friends of Jesus. The Bible calls them the disciples. And eventually they become the apostles, right? So at this point, they're just followers of Jesus, and they're good friends of Jesus. And they've been following Jesus for a good bit, and so they're close. These two particular guys that are in the story, they're like legit brothers, but the rest of them are close as brothers. And so they hear about this and like, come on now, are you kidding me? You're going to go ask Jesus for that? Now, they weren't upset because they were like, how dare you ask Jesus for such a thing? No, what they're upset about is they wanted to ask Jesus about having such things. They're like, no, hold on. Why would you deserve to be left and right? I deserve to be left or right. That's my position. Just because your mama took you, that doesn't give you the right. Then they're upset. Jesus sees this bickering, and he makes a decision. He says, you know what? I'm watching these guys fight for status. He looks into the people he cares about most, and he says, I see you. You're fighting for status. And this is what Jesus says to them. And Jesus called them together, verse 25. Jesus called them together, and he said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. In other words, Jesus sees them fighting over status, and immediately he recognizes something. He sees them fighting, and immediately he says, I get it. I know why. And so he pulls them together and he says, guys, actually, I understand why you're fighting. I understand why you're upset with each other. I get it. It's because this is the only model you know. He references that the people who are in power for the Gentiles lord it over one another. Now, to give you a little bit of historical context, at this particular point in time, the Jewish folks there, which are all these guys who are talking, and the entire nation of Israel and Jerusalem is an occupied state by the Romans. And so their view of leadership is a leadership that is Gentile. And so that's just a word that means anyone who's not a Jew. And so he says, hey, I get why you're fighting for status, because that's all you see the people who have power in our world do. They bicker and they fight and they backstab each other and they try to outduel one another, and they're fighting for status because they think that status is going to give them significance. But he steps in, and again, in the first question between just the brothers and the mom, he says there's something bigger, and he points them to the Father. And in this particular moment, he does the same thing. He says, I know the model that you continue to see treats people like this. where you have to fight and bicker in order to gain status so that you might feel like you have significance. However, I want to introduce you to a different way of thinking. So Jesus isn't getting on to them that they're bickering and arguing. Jesus is not upset that the mom asked, can they have these two places? Jesus recognizes, of course you want that. That's the only thing you've seen. But that's why I'm here, to show you something new. And Jesus says, let me tell you how it really should work. Serve one another. Serve one another. If you really want to be great, serve one another. Their model has been, if you want to be great, achieve status and lord it over someone. And Jesus says, if you really want to be great, serve one another. Now, I don't know how they're kind of walking through this idea like, hey, I don't know, that's probably not what I wanted. That's probably not the hope that I was going for, all those things. If we go back to Jesus asking them the question, are you sure you can drink from the cup that I'm going to drink? And they confidently, I don't know if you remember what they said. They said, yes, we can. Oh, yeah, we can do that. We can do that. And whatever it takes to get to the left and the right, if whatever it takes, we're willing to do it, sign us up, let's go, let's get on the path, let's move in that direction. Yes, we can. And so Jesus takes the opportunity to say, you want me to tell you the path to get to where you want to go? Serving. It's humbling yourselves among the people among you. It's positioning yourself so that you could give until it inconveniences you. To give of your time, your talent, to give of your resources, to put what you have at leverage on behalf of other people. And I wonder if those two brothers are standing there thinking back on, we already told him when he said, do you think we can follow your footsteps? Yes, we can. And I wonder if the light bulb is starting to go off for them, just what they had signed up for. And I wonder if right now you're asking yourself the same question. I want Jesus to love me. He already does. I want Jesus to give me significance. You already have it. But then Jesus turns it around and says, will you follow me? Will you get to the significant part where your significance is recognized in a way that only God could give you significance in your community, in your family? Would you serve? You see, the world has a different model that it follows. And Jesus says, let me introduce you to something new and better. And it makes sense that you would want to follow the model that's been modeled to you. That's all we know. But Jesus' way is better. In other words, I think it's safe to say that the path to significance is through serving. The path to significance is through serving. Jesus ends this little piece of the message, this little story, with an incredible statement that I want you to lean in really close and hear me say. This is Jesus talking. He says, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And so Jesus begins to walk through a little bit of, hey, I want you to follow me. But let me just make sure we set this up correctly so we understand the weight of what he just said. So Jesus is a pretty good bit into his ministry, a couple years or so, and he's getting close, but not quite yet, to the end of his ministry career, which is going to end up on the cross, right? And so Jesus is looking at his closest followers, recognizing that they have a poor model to follow, and substituting the model he wants them to follow. And he says, hey, could you drink of the cup that I'm going to drink? And they say, yes, we can. But what they don't know is what that cup entails. You see, Jesus says, I didn't come to to be served, but to serve. Right? That's what he says. Now, what they haven't seen yet, and this is really important, so stay with me. What they haven't seen yet, let me back up. What they have seen. Jesus, up until this point, before he gives them this challenge, has positioned himself to serve the poor. Jesus, up to this point, has positioned himself to serve those who have afflictions, have leprosy, who have become blind, the lame, that can't walk, paralyzed. He's put himself in the places where those folks who in this particular time would be discarded from society and placed in large groups and kind of outcast. He continues to put himself in the middle of those places and bring life and healing to those places. He's placed himself among his enemies and he served them. He's placed himself in those in front of those who oppress him, and yet he serves them. He's placed himself in front of folks who call him a heretic and a liar and deceiver and say that he's from the devil himself, right? And he continues to serve even those people. Jesus has done all that. But I'm going to tell you what Jesus hasn't done yet. He makes this challenge, but this is what he hasn't done. If you fast forward just a little bit, there's a Thursday night. And the disciples or the closest friends of Jesus, they're going to go have dinner because there's a particular religious festival they're observing on this Thursday night. And they begin to walk into a room that was prearranged for them to be in. And normally when you walk into a room like this, they would have an attendant with a bowl of water and some towels. And the bowl of water was there, and the towels were there, but there was no attendant. And so as the close friends of Jesus walked into the room, they saw the bowl, and they saw the towels, and they were like, man, Jesus is cheap on us. He couldn't afford the attendant. I guess I'm just going to walk in, and I ain't going to worry about washing my feet, because that's what they do. They would wash their feet. The attendant would wash everyone's feet as they came in, because they wore flip-flops and sandals all the time on dirt roads. And so they'd wash them off before they went to dinner. And so they all file past this basin of water and these towels, and they're just like, well, Jesus missed this detail. And so Jesus comes in, and then he gets up from the table, and he goes over, and he takes the basin of water, and he takes the towels, and he wraps it around his waist, and he goes one by one, all 12, and he washes every single one of their feet. And I wonder if they're going back to this conversation where he said, hey, I didn't come to be served, but to serve. And maybe they weren't putting it together in this particular conversation we read in Matthew chapter 20. But I promise you, by the end of the book of Matthew, they're starting to figure it out. He's serious. Like, this wasn't just a theoretical thought. Like, let me just throw this pontification out in front and just, let's think about it. How cool is it that the creator of the world, the guy that hung the moon and the stars, that spins all of the things that spin in our galaxy, that hand-formed the mountains, the agent of creation, that guy just says, you know what? I actually came to serve you. Like, that's so nice. That this King of Kings has come to serve. That's cool. But when the King of Kings gets on his knees and washes your feet, suddenly it brings a little bit more meaning to I came to serve. And he wasn't even done. There's a guy who's with him at the table that Jesus knows within the next 12 hours is going to betray him. And that betrayal, ultimately, in 12 hours after that, is going to put nails in his hands and in his feet, and him in the greatest agony a human being can go through at that time in capital punishment. He's going to hang on a cross. And yet he smiles and loves on the feet of that betrayer, because he said, I didn't come to be served. I came to serve. Even my enemies, I've come to serve. And then a few hours later, he lays down on a piece of wood, and he stretches his arms out. And you know what happens? There's a Roman soldier that picks up a nail about this big, and the king of the world allows hands that he knit together and that Roman soldier's mother's womb drive a nail in his hands. As he was putting those hands together, he knew ahead of time, forming those tiny little baby hands, he knew this is the hand that's going to take the life of my son. And I'm going to make this hand with all the care in the world. And I'm going to give him just as much love and care and attention, even though it's going to cost me the most pain I've ever experienced. That's what God did. Because Jesus said, I didn't come here for you to serve me. I came here to serve you. And here's the deal. And this is probably the most important part. Jesus has every right to claim status. But at the end of the day, status has nothing to do with significance. It's possible for you to get a little blue check mark on your Twitter account, or maybe one on your Instagrams or the Facebooks. And you get that little blue check mark, but if one day everybody decides to stop following you, you get to keep the blue check mark. but you have no influence because you're no longer significant. You still have the status symbol, but you have no significance. Now, let me put it to you this way. Jesus had every status already. King of Kings, agent of creation, the guy who hung the moon and stars, helped speak the world into existence. Jesus had all those status pieces. But, and here, let's just make sure we're following here. If Jesus doesn't come and serve us, think about this. If Jesus doesn't show up and live a life of service, we don't even care about his status, do we? Think about it. Think about it. If Jesus never puts himself on the cross, if Jesus never washes our feet, if Jesus never reaches out to the poor, if Jesus never inspires us to serve one another, if Jesus stays distant as the hanger of the stars and the King of Kings, if Jesus stays far away in his enormous throne room with 2 seats on his left and his right, completely empty because he can't get close enough to, because he isn't even interested in us, if Jesus doesn't put flesh on and begin to walk around and move into our neighborhoods, if Jesus doesn't serve us, all he has is status, and even he recognizes status isn't enough to make himself significant to us. What made him significant was his willingness to say, I'm willing to take my status and put it on the shelf because I want to come and serve the people I love the most. And how am I going to serve you? I'm going to give my life to you. Jesus says, I've got all the status in the world. Let me tell you something. I'll give it all up to serve the people I love so that it gives me an opportunity to save them. You see, the truth is, the path to significance, even for Jesus, is through serving. The path to significance is serving. I think we all want to be significant. I know we all want to be significant. It's because God gave us the desire for significance. I think about this. God implants in us this desire to be significant. And then God has a destination. God says, I want to give you this God-given desire to be significant. And then I have this desire of where I want you to end up in your significance. Right? And so what's missing is the path to get there. And so what the enemy does, the enemy comes and he says, you know what? I'm pretty clever. And so what I don't want to do is I don't want to convince them that this God-given desire to be significant is bad. Now I want to do that. I want to manipulate what you do with that God-given desire. And so what he's done is he said, hey, you got a God-given desire, and then God desires you to end up here in your significance. And the vehicle to get there, Jesus says, is through serving. But what the enemy does is he steps in and says, no, you don't get from your God-given desire to your God-desired place in life by serving people. You get there through status. He says, hey, I don't want to change the destination, and I don't want to change where you start from, but I want to change what gets you from one place to the other. That's clever. That's clever. Because all of a sudden, he's got our entire world chasing blue check marks, nicer cars and nicer houses, in thought that that's going to bring us significance because it will give us status. And Jesus is trying to just tell us, no. I'm not mad at you because that's what the world has shown you. But let me awaken you to something bigger than yourselves. Let me awaken you to something that's beyond what you can feel and see tangibly. Let me awaken you to a kingdom that's greater than a seat on the left and on the right. Let me awaken you to a kingdom that Jesus actually isn't the one pulling all the strings. That the Father is. He says the Father's going to decide who's on the left and on the right. That's not up to me. He says, let me awaken you to that. Could we all be awakened to that reality this morning? That as you contemplate what is the symbol you are chasing, then maybe you should stop the chase and begin to serve. Then maybe the status that you think is going to define your life and increase your significance, then maybe you will recognize that you have a path to significance driven by a desire for significance, and the path to get there is through serving, not status. Think about it for a moment. whenever we celebrate your homegoing, when we have a celebration of life, we have you've stopped breathing on this earth, and you have people come and talk at that celebration for you, who do you want to talk on your behalf? Who will be there? Will it be the fancy rich people that live in an office somewhere, that ran your company, that you saw at Christmas parties? They've got status. But do you think they actually have the significance in your life? Will it be the folks that you admire on Instagram or you follow on Facebook, and you look at their life like, man, I just want to kind of model myself after that. They got the greatest farmhouse, and I just want that farmhouse. Look at that shiplap. You know what I'm talking about? Are they going to be the ones that come and talk about how significant you were in their life? Think about it. Who's significant in your life right now? Who are those people? I promise you it's not those people. It's not the corner office people you're disconnected from or that signed your checks, though. That's not the people that are most significant in your life. It's the people that have spent time with you. It's the people that pour into you. It's the people that see you for who you are and who you could be, and they take the time to help you get there. It's the people every day in your life, day in and day out, that you love on and love on you. 100%. That's where we're at. Here's the real question. Maybe the question isn't, who would be on your list? Who would be the significant people on your list? Maybe that's not the question. Maybe the better question is going to be, whose list are you on? Whose list are you on? My hope is that list grows for you. That right now, if you could think through, who have I served in a way that I'm now significant in their life? If that list is tiny, it just means you got a lot of room to grow. And we can grow together. We can do this together. We can make strides that change the relationships, the people in our community together. And you know what's better? Is we can do it in the name of Jesus, which means it's always about something bigger than ourselves. And as we serve the way Jesus serves in our community, it points them to a kingdom they can't see and awakens them to the desire for them to be significant, and they recognize that Jesus has an answer for their eternal soul, a grace that they don't deserve, mercy they didn't earn, and a salvation that they can hold in their hands for the rest of their eternal lives. And the vehicle to get there is to serve. Are you with me? Are you with me?